The trade unionist and socialist coalition is now the sixth biggest party on the ballot. They question the £850 billion subsidy to the City of London, let alone the austerity and privatisation policies of the Tories, Labour and the Liberal Democrats. With me is the national chair of TUSC, Dave Nellist, who is a former Labour MP for Coventry South East. Welcome back, Dave. Let's begin with you being the sixth largest party. What media exposure are you getting for this? It might come as a surprise to some people.
It may well do. We're going to have over 130 parliamentary candidates and well over 500, perhaps 600 council candidates. And as you say, that makes us the sixth largest party on the ballot paper. Regretfully, that doesn't easily translate into the establishment media giving us equal coverage to what our numbers suggest.
Even though there's a statutory duty for broadcasters to give you fair media coverage because you're standing that many candidates.
And then the lawyers get involved in what is fair. The caveats that come are, do you have elected members already? Well, yes, we have councillors in a number of cities around the country. Do you have past people elected? I've had a fair bit of experience parliamentary and regionally and locally in local government. But the tests that they apply mean that we will get a broadcast on the BBC and the ITV. We will get included in some debates, but not the leaders' debate and not in the major coverage in the next few weeks.
Do you think there's a conspiracy then?
Oh, I certainly think that the anti-austerity arguments which we're putting forward and the sharp challenges we're putting forward on low wages, on zero-hour contracts, on the need for a massive house-building programme and the other social improvements we'd like to see are marginalised in elections when the main parties all have an overlapping agenda of austerity and just want to talk about the margins of that agenda. We challenge it fundamentally.
And what do you think of the impact of the Greens? Natalie Bennett, however, has said she would, in any perhaps coalition, have to go along with Labour cuts. What do you think about how you will be working with Greens?
For the sort of folk I come from and represent, whether cuts are carried out enthusiastically by Tories and UKIP or with a heavy heart by Labour and the Greens, we know that running the council in Brighton and being part of a cabinet in Bristol, they have, however reluctantly, carried out cuts. Doesn't cut ice if it's your youth club, your library, your park or street that's not being cleaned. What defines us as a political party is 100% opposition to austerity and the cuts. And none of our councillors or members of Parliament, if we're lucky enough to get elected, will vote for any cuts.
You were, of course, a Labour MP, though. What about TUSC people selling out when they become MPs in Parliament?
Well, personally, and there's quite a lot of us that hold by this, we believe that the nearer you are to the living conditions of the people you represent, and I spent the whole of my time in Parliament on the average factory wage in Coventry, which was less than half an MP's salary. The nearer you are to those conditions, the less likely you are to be drawn into the establishment club, which Westminster is. But the more active you have as a base, the more active participation from the organisations and the communities of working class people on whatever representatives get elected, the better chance you have of holding the line.
One of the big policies of TUSC is opposition to TTIP. Will that be a big platform for the party of the election?
It certainly was. It was added at our conference only recently. And you can look around the world and see, for example, the way in which Philip Morris is attacking Uruguay at the moment, to see what happens when private companies get the power to interfere in the decisions of governments. And the main fear about TTIP in a lot of people's minds is that it would open the National Health Service and other public services in Britain to private multinationals, American-based and elsewhere, trying to privatise those services, and if they're not allowed to by domestic policy, then being able to go to international courts in order to seek redress.
There do seem rather a lot of these small anti-austerity parties. How are you working together with other
politics has changed. In my lifetime, politics has changed. When I was born in the 1950s, then 97% of people in this country voted for either Labour or for Tory. I suspect when we see the results on May the 8th, it'll probably be nearer 60% than 90-odd%. There are at least a third of the adult population of this country looking for some sort of alternative, and that's spreading in different ways. Now, in Scotland, Labour look like they're going to lose the vast majority of their seats, and the SNP are gaining from that. In England, I would suspect that many of those not saying the whole millions of them, but many of those who deserted Labour because of its record under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown may go to other parties. And at the moment, regretfully, it looks like UKIP is the biggest inheritor of the votes, largely, I think, because of the failure of the trade union movement to challenge the social conditions on which UKIP is then blaming recent arrivals to this shore, rather than the billionaires who are really running society. So yes, there are a number of parties. What we're trying to do, through being initially a coalition, is to bring together and to be the largest force on the left, which we will be in these elections, attract new working class and socialist activists, bring deeper roots inside the trade union movement, and to build a voice for working class people of the quality that they deserve.
Polls show that 80% do favour trade unions. They're essential to protect workers' interests, at least. Why do you think we don't see that theme in mainstream discourses?
In a sense, it comes back to your first question.
Even Miliband says.
Yeah, it comes back to your first
reduce union.
Yeah, your first question though about how do you think we're going to do in the May elections. Look, Nigel Farage was on the flagship BBC programme Question Time 29 times before he got his first MP in Parliament. If the policies which we put forward as TUSC, which include such things as renationalisation of rail and Royal Mail, renationalisation of gas, water and electricity, all of which have 60 to 70 to 80% support within the population, were put forward and allowed to be explained to the same extent, for example, as UKIP's had a platform in recent years, then I think the popularity of socialist ideas would grow in this country.
Labour is, of course, committed to the massive cuts that are ahead of us if one of the major three parties were in coalition, if the Labour or Tories are there. If you're not going to be Prime Minister, presumably, so what pressure can TUSC put on in Parliament on a Labour Party coalition after May?
I think regretfully, you are right. In January, there was a vote when the Chancellor, George Osborne, brought forward the Charter for Budget Responsibility, which embedded another £30 billion worth of cuts into the next Parliament. There were 515 MPs from all parties voted in favour. 18 voted against, and only 5 Labour MPs said no to another £30 billion worth of cuts. Now, whether we get any or many elected to Parliament, the first test of those cuts, in my view, is actually going to be in local councils. So the budgets that local councils have in the next 1, 2 and 3 years are going to continue to be cut in the same way they have in the last Parliament. That means more youth clubs, more libraries, more children's centres, more family centres, more local authority jobs going. And in that battleground, I think people would welcome more decent shop stewards on their local councils prepared to work with those campaigns to defend local services. So our pressure would come from the bottom up, from embedding ourselves in the campaigns to save local services and then demanding from politicians higher up the tree that they reverse the policies which are demanding those cuts.
And you are called the Trade Union and Socialist Coalition. Finally, any sign of bigger trade unions supporting your party instead of the Labour Party that, as you say, supports the cuts?
We have very senior but individual members from unions such as the Prison Officers Association, the Fire Brigades Union, on our steering
But the
committee,
big unions.
both of which unions are due, as far as I can see, to be discussing their relationship with TUSC at their conferences, which are after the general election. The 3 biggest unions in this country are Unite, are Unison and the GMB. Len McCluskey, the General Secretary of Unite, has said if Labour fails to get elected or gets elected and carries out Tory-like policies, he would reassess with the membership of Unite the relationship with the Labour Party. Now, we've got so far 130 parliamentary candidates. Over a quarter of those come from Unite. We've got over 30 senior Unite activists in towns and cities around the country already making the decision they want to stand independently with TUSC. So whatever happens after the election, if austerity continues, the arguments against austerity will continue, and the need for a vehicle like TUSC, I think, will become more and more within the bigger unions a calling point that people respond to.
Dave Nellist, thank you. That's it for today, but we're back on Saturday when we hear more political voices seeking a mandate in May, Left Unity and the National Health Action Party. Till then, contact us via Twitter, Facebook, SoundCloud and email, and don't forget RTUK News with Bill Dodd. It's on every weekday evening between 6 and 10. See you on Saturday.